ಸಮೃದ್ಧ ನಿಸರ್ಗ ಸಂಪತ್ತಿಗೆ, ಇನ್ನೊಂದು ನಿಸರ್ಗದ ಸೇನಾನಿ ಡಾಕ್ಟರ್ ಶಿವರಾಮ ಕಾರಂತರ ಕಾರಣಕ್ಕಾಗಿ ಭಾರತೀಯ ಸಾಹಿತಿಗಳಲ್ಲಿ ಅತ್ಯಂತ ಮಹತ್ವದ ವ್ಯಕ್ತಿಯಾದ ಕಾರಂತರ 10 ಮುಖಗಳ ದರ್ಶನ ನಿಜಕ್ಕೂ ರೋಮಾಂಚನಕಾರಿಯೇ. ಈ ಶತಮಾನದ ಮೊದಲ ದಶಕದಲ್ಲಿ ಕಾರಂತರು ದಕ್ಷಿಣ ಕನ್ನಡದಲ್ಲಿ ಹುಟ್ಟಿದರು. ದಕ್ಷಿಣ ಕನ್ನಡ ಜಿಲ್ಲೆ ಕಾಡು ಮೇಡು, ಸಮುದ್ರ, ಹೊಳೆ, ಹಳ್ಳ, ಜನ ಅವರ ಸಾಹಿತ್ಯದ ಪ್ರಾಣರೂಪಗಳು. ಕಾರಂತರ ಬದುಕೆಂದರೆ ಅದು ಇಡೀ ಭಾರತದ ಚರಿತ್ರೆ. 20ನೇ ಶತಮಾನದ ಭಾರತದ ಎಲ್ಲ ಘಟ್ಟಗಳನ್ನು ಅವರು ಕಂಡವರು, ಬದುಕಿದವರು. ತಮ್ಮ ಬಾಲ್ಯದ ಲೋಕಕ್ಕೆ ಕಾರಂತರು ನಮ್ಮನ್ನು ಕರೆದೊಯ್ಯುತ್ತಿದ್ದಾರೆ. ಅವರು ಓದಿದ, ಬೆಳೆದ, ಆಡಿದ ಪರಿಸರ ಎಲ್ಲಕ್ಕೂ ಕರೆದೊಯ್ಯುತ್ತಿದ್ದಾರೆ.
2ನೇ ಕ್ಲಾಸಿಂದ 5
Am I audible?
Yes.
Yeah. So good evening, everybody. Sir, good evening.
Yes.
So once again, welcome to another session. Usually, like when we do our talks, we like recently we have we did one session also with Mr. Utkarsh Patel on Ramayanas, and that session also was which also started with a presentation, and I think today it was a great idea to show that lovely clip of Mr. Karanth, especially in the amongst the young dancers. So yesterday was his birth anniversary, and we thought we should introduce Mr. Karanth to young people who are not aware of him, and to touch upon certain memories to the older ones or ones who are already aware of him. So today we are it's a pleasure from the Potato Eaters Collective to welcome Professor Pattabhirama Somayaji, who is a professor of English at University College in Mangalore. So without taking much of time, I would pass on the like this is not a stage, but we will think it as a podium, and like I'll pass on the screen to Mr. Pattabhirama Somayaji to share and also share his memories, whatever. I know that we were talking just before the live that he was physically in very much in touch with Mr. Karanth, and like and also he's from the same college as Mr. Karanth had done his PU, and he has some wonderful things to share with us.
Hopefully.
Sir, please.
So shall I start?
Yes, please.
Yes. Okay, I mean, this is a session which this Nachimuttu and my friend Samvartha have come together to arrange. I'm grateful to them, and I'm also grateful to this Potato Eaters community I don't know why they call themselves potato eaters, but I thought I know a very great, a genius of a painter called Vincent van Gogh, who did several paintings uh, on title Potato Eaters.
Sir, it's after him we have named our collective.
Yes.
Oh.
And he did it after the European famine.
Yeah.
He is my great master. I got to him through Heidegger.
Okay.
Martin Heidegger, the great philosopher, led me to Vincent van Gogh. For example, Martin Heidegger speaks at great length about the shoes that Vincent van Gogh painted. Anyway, that is an aside. So let me start. I'm here to speak about Kota, Shivaram, Karanth. Am I audible? Am I audible? Yes. Kota, Shivaram, Karanth was not just a person. It's a wonder. I don't know where to begin and where to end. So what I thought was, I will speak about some bare facts at the beginning, so that, we know who we are speaking about, but we'll speak about the wonder afterwards. You see, this Shivaram Karanth, these are bare facts. Lived between 1902 to 1997. And he was a self-taught man. Of course, he went to school. He came from a very orthodox Brahmin family, but he went to school. And he also entered into college. At that time, it was called intermediate. Now it's called pre-university, which was a one-year course. It was my college where I work now that he was a student. He was a student for only 2 months. He quit it. It seems he was sitting at the flagpole, which is in front of our college, which is still there, in front of the main road in Mangalore. And he saw a huge procession in support of Gandhi, propagating Swadeshi and Khadi. And he said goodbye to our college and joined the meeting. And he became more than a university by himself. He was a loner. He learned everything by himself, not by teachers. The term that is used for such persons is autodidact, a term that appears in Sartre's novel called Nausea. Autodidact. He was an autodidact. He was a self-taught man. It's very important to know that he was in his very young days, school days, influenced very deeply and very profoundly by no other than a great personality like Mahatma Gandhi. And to me, I have not seen Mahatma Gandhi, though I'm a fan of his, though I speak about him. But to me, Shivaram Karanth was the walking Mahatma Gandhi in front of me. He was Mahatma Gandhi incarnate that I saw. Even in his dress also. You see, he would wear his dhoti. You should see his pictures. He would wear his dhoti in the most traditional way. Not, this. That's one thing. Second is, I'm talking about some facts. Second is, first is 1902 to 1997. Second is that he quit our college, quit education and became an autodidact. And the third is about his writings. He wrote novels, he wrote short stories, he wrote poetic dramas. That's what he actually began with. He wrote poetic dramas, he acted in them, he danced in them, and he wrote books for children. He wrote autobiographies. He has two autobiographies of his own. One is called 10 Faces of a Crazy Mind. That was when he was in his middle ages. And the last one was Smriti Pataladinda, which means From My Memories, which is in 3 volumes. And he wrote biographies. He wrote a biography of Ramakrishna Paramahamsa, who is very dear to me also, for his mother, who he loved so very much. He dedicates that book to his mother on Ramakrishna Paramahamsa. And he wrote also a biography of Panjay Mangesh Rao, who was a very great, Kannada, he was a high school headmaster, but a very founding father of modern Kannada. He wrote such lovable songs, particularly for children. And Karanth wrote so many travelogues. He was a widely traveled man. Not only, when I speak about travelogues, what comes to my mind is like Gandhi, who traveled throughout the length and breadth of India and became a legend because of his travel. Karanth traveled throughout Karnataka, and particularly in and around the place where he lived. He was a traveler, and he traveled also to other places, and he has travelogues about his visit to the West, his visit to the present-day Myanmar, and so many places. What we would be surprised to know is that he brought out a huge collection on art and architecture of Karnataka. He went through the length and breadth of Karnataka to locate, to find out the sculptures, the paintings, the arts, and so on, and published a book called Kala Prapancha, The World of Art, published by Karnataka University, which is in Dharwad. I'll just give you a list. I am talking about facts, so I just give you a list. Numbers might be a little less or more. This is what I picked up from my Wikipedia. So I might be wrong. 47 novels, 31 plays, 4 short story collections, 6 books of essays and sketches of personalities, 13 books on art and architecture, 2 volumes of poetry, 9 encyclopedias. Imagine. Universities don't do this. And with all their apparatus and with all their staff and with all so-called well-paid professors, they don't do it. 9 encyclopedias and hundreds of articles.
And film scripts. We are not counting the film scripts.
I'll come to that. I mean, I have several more things to say in terms of facts also.
Okay.
The fourth thing is that he married outside his caste. He belonged to a very orthodox Brahmin family. Think of an orthodox Brahmin family of 1902.
Yes.
And he married out of his caste. He married a Bunt girl who was his student. He was running a
Bunts are
Shetty.
Okay, they're OBCs.
No. This Deepika Rai's.
Okay, Deepika Padukone. Okay.
No.
Okay, fine.
No, not Deepika Padukone. This Aishwarya Rai. Rai is Bunt.
You mean
Rai? Aishwarya Rai. Are we stuck?
I think there's a problem with the network.
What do we do?
Aishwarya Rai. You're talking about Aishwarya Rai?
Yes. I mean, that is her. That is the caste I'm speaking about.
Okay.
So he married outside his caste, at that time considered to be a much lower caste. And she was his student in a school where he taught dance and drama.
Okay.
And he was ridiculed for that by almost everyone at that time.
Yeah, I can imagine that.
Yes.
Student,
yes,
younger to you, she would have been much younger to him.
Yes, and more. No, he was young and she was also young. The question is not about age. The question is about caste and discrimination. Because he belonged to a very orthodox family, orthodox Brahmin family. And that orthodoxy, even after 120 years down, still exists. I am a Brahmin. I can't. I mean,
yes, sir.
I live a life that I like, but not people in my family. They can't. They don't want to. That is the orthodoxy. That it's a very. I mean. So he married his student. The other thing is, I also said, I said it earlier also, he has traveled most extensively in and around his place. He has literally seen what he spoke about. It's not as if he was imagining things. That's the kind of person. And also internationally. And the most important thing is that even though he traveled so widely, like Gandhi, who had his Sabarmati or Wardha ashrams, Karanth had his two, karma bhumis, the places where he worked from. One was at a place called Puttur, which is just 50 kilometers away from Mangaluru, where he established a Shantiniketan-like school called Balavana. And then in his later years...
Is it still active, the school?
The school had had gone into, I mean, it was neglected, but now everyone is taking interest, and now it is revived and it is redone. It's now protected as a heritage, that is by the previous Congress government. They donated money, and it's now a heritage place. And the present government, which is a Sangh Parivar government in Karnataka, intends to acquire another 2 acres of land and add to it and make it bigger and so on. So that is the kind of person that he is. So that was his first karma bhumi. And the last one was Saligrama. Saligrama is some 2 kilometers away from his birthplace, which is Kota. Okay.
Okay.
And about translations, he is also available in English. He is available in English. Unfortunately, it is only a few people who translated him into English. If he were to be available in English, I think his stature would have been far better than what it was for India. For us, of course, for Karnataka and for us, he is, he is a very great person. But he could have been for India and to the international world a much greater personality if he was available in English translations. The translations are so scarce. I mean, his 2 novels were translated into English. If I'm right, I'm not very sure. I know of 2. One is Marali Mannige, which is called Back to the Soil.
So that is the first novel he had wrote? That's his debut?
No. That was a much later novel. But in English we have Marali Mannige, which is translated twice. First, it was first translated by H.Y. Sharada Prasad, who was for many prime ministers the press secretary. A Kannadiga. He was a Kannada man, H.Y. Sharada Prasad. He was himself a poet. And he was for Indira Gandhi, Rajiv Gandhi, Vajpayee, and others until his death. Was the press secretary to all prime ministers. He translated Marali Mannige into English first. And in, I think, some 10 years ago or so, a lady called Padma Ramachandra Sharma, the wife of an important Kannada poet called B.C. Ramachandra Sharma, translated this again into English. Same book, Marali Mannige. Okay. The other one is Chomanadudi, Choma's Drum. That's also available in English.
Yeah, that is...
I don't remember who has translated it, but I know that it is a text, for example, in Kerala now, in Kerala universities, and I have gone to several Kerala.
That's what I was.
I've gone to several.
It's also because of. You please continue. I'll ask the
several Kerala universities to speak about this book because it is a prescribed text for PG students there. Okay, and then this 8th point in this first facts section is about this K.K. Hebbar's very famous sketch, which is on the cover page of Karanth's first autobiography called 10 Phases of the Crazy Mind, where Karanth is shown in this K.K. Hebbar's most beautiful lines as a many-handed Nataraja.
Okay.
a dancing posture, like Nataraja, but with many handles. So, and then the ninth point I want to make about facts is that about awards. Am I audible still?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Go ahead, please.
Yes. And awards. Now, I don't go into the list of awards that he got, but two things I should mention. One is that in 1978, fortunately, not at his dying age, he died in 1997. In 1978, he got his Jnanapitha. And Karanth, after he got his Jnanapitha, whenever he was invited to a talk and so on, he would say, don't think that Jnanapitha confers me with knowledge. Knowledge and Jnanapitha are not equivalent.
Yes.
Jnana can be pitta. The word that he used was Jnana Pitta. Pitta is, I think, in English called hubert.
Yeah, hubert.
Yes. And the second thing I want to mention about awards is he was a Padma Bhushan awardee. And when emergency was imposed on India by Indira Gandhi's Congress government, he returned it.
Yeah.
In protest. And if you see that documentary, you will see from Saligrama, he types on his typewriter a one-page letter saying how shocked and sorry he was about this nasty government. And he returns this award to the government. He was the other instances we have are previous to it are of Rabindranath Tagore, who returned his knighthood when Jallianwala Bagh happened.
Yes.
Or prior to that, Gandhi, who returned the medal that was given to him for war service to England. Those are the only two instances I could think of. Of course.
Now there are a lot. But during
that was very rare.
Very rare.
Yes. And the 10th point I want to make about facts. I have I don't know whether I'll end with facts only. Earning a living. You see, he lived exclusively and solely by writing.
That is rare.
He had
even rare today.
He had no job as such, and it was his practice to write a novel a year.
Okay.
One novel per year.
That was quite a rigorous.
And at a time when writing was not at all a profitable business vocation.
Even today, I very rarely see people who, especially who are serious writers, who live on writing.
Yes, but today I think you can be a popular writer and you can go on.
Popular writer. Yeah.
No, you can go on to net and you can get yourself published. Even if that's there. So that's one. And more importantly, see, how did he write? He had a personal secretary. He had many personal secretaries. I'll come to that point later. He would dictate. It's not as if you think of a writer, generally, how do you think of a writer? He would sit down and write and scratch. improve upon it and this and that and so on. No, he would just go on speaking and somebody would write it in shorthand. There was something called shorthand at that time.
Yeah, yeah.
Typing and shorthand.
Yeah,
And
I've
the
gone to classes.
What the personal secretary would get it on shorthand would be typed by her or him, and he would go through the final version.
Okay.
And that's how he wrote. And he had his last personal secretary when he was about 85 or so. A lady called Malini Malya. I should mention her name because she's a very passionate and a great lady. And now, of course, I think in her 90s or so. She was so passionate about him and she did so much of work for him as secretary. And that was also a point of ridicule. And people, he would, Karanth would take a walk in the morning. And she would also be, she was also living nearby. She would also be with him. And the society is so narrow-minded that they used to make fun of him, ridicule him, saying, what is this old man doing with this young and pretty woman? But this woman has built a 3-storied, huge, museum of which she is the director, where everything that Karanth did is preserved. Okay. Very carefully preserved.
That itself is very rare. Like, especially remember.
And unfortunately, she is a lone woman. Okay. She is a loner. And now, if somebody can take it over, she would hand it over to them, because she has no heir. She has no issues. And what is going to happen to it, I don't know. I am really troubled. If it goes into some wrong hands, everything will be lost. That's another thing I wanted to say. The other point I wanted to make was about the ridicules. One was about, as I said, his secretary. The other one is about his marriage, intercaste marriage. The third thing is about the books that he wrote. You see, in the 1940s, he wrote books for children, elementary school children. And those...
Issue the internet. Hello?
Yes, tell me. Hello? There's something wrong?
Yeah, fine. No, the internet was... now it's fine, yeah.
Okay, in the 1940s, he wrote books for elementary school children. Wonderful books.
Yeah.
Which were reintroduced in Karnataka in the 1990s by one of his very devoted fans, who was the chief minister of Karnataka, called Veerappa Moily, who then became central minister and so on. One particular lesson in that book was ridiculed, and there was a big movement and so on, big protest in Karnataka and so on, and the book had to be withdrawn.
What was it about?
The book was about the lesson. The book was a larger book, but one lesson, particularly one lesson. It was about carpenters.
Okay.
And the title, it was just the title that mattered to them, mattered to the carpenters, and all who wanted to protest, all who were envious of Karanth. Title was Lata Pata Acharya. It means a carpenter who is always doing sounds. Okay, that's so that was the way he was ridiculed for his marriage for his secretary, and for his school book.
No, sorry to interrupt. Sorry to interrupt. Just a question, like before I forget. As you told that you would dictate and somebody would write. As you are a writer yourself, you also write articles and like things. So how do you see that practice? How do you?
No,
This is very
this is
yeah. No, I feel like when I write, I also write sometimes. I occasionally write stuff, fiction also, and also sometimes essays and other things, and mostly screenplays. I
hmm,
also feel more than writing
hmm,
when I actually narrate a story to a person.
hmm.
That's when it becomes more alive. Maybe I'm missing out on certain crafty words or the
Ex-
craft of
ex-
it, but the
exa-
emotion.
Exactly. I'll come to that point in detail later. I am just at the beginning and facts, talking about
Okay,
facts.
okay,
I mean,
okay.
actually, I mean, he is a person, I mean, who was so fidgety. He had no time to, I mean, he had so many things to do. He can't sit down and write.
Hmm,
He would dictate,
hmm,
and that has a beauty of its own. I'll come to that point later.
hmm,
And the 12th point about facts I want to make is that he was a Gandhian.
hmm,
He lived like a Gandhian, despite the fact that he began by being a Gandhian, and in between he critiqued Gandhi, and whether or not he was critical of Gandhi, he was. He was a true Gandhian to the end of his life. That's what that point also I'll come back to later. And then when I was a student, a college student, I came across a book, a small book, a booklet, listing all Karanth's works very meticulously by a person called Shekhar India. It was a very rare thing at that time. I mean, it was a booklet. I mean, which means that Karanth had written so much that you can write a book about the books that he wrote. Huh? It's not explanation. It's just a list of books that he wrote. Huh? A booklet.
okay.
And the 14th point, and that is the last point about facts. The first thing is when I was not even into college, the novel that I wrote, novel that I read of Karanth is called Dharmarayana Samsara, the family of Dharmaraya. And I was surprised to know that one could write. I was surprised to know that it was about the places and rivers and mountains and hillocks that surrounded me. I was living by the bank of a river called Sita Nadi.
Hmm.
And much of the story takes place on that Sita Nadi. My God, I mean, if a book, a novel, a writing, an art could be so close to, I mean, it could be so realistic that it is right at your threshold. That is how I got introduced to Karanth. It was by accident. Okay, I mean, that's about facts. I mean, that this is preliminary. No, I mean, this is not actually, all this is something that you can get on Wikipedia here and there and wherever. That's not my point. My points begin now, and I don't know how long I'll go on. I have 5 points to make, which might be very lengthy, but Nachimuttu can stop me wherever I can, wherever I should. The first is the Karanth, the person. Karanth for me is a flood of memories, personally speaking. I'm speaking about him as a person, as I know him as a person. I can't go further. I can't go on to talk about Karanth without speaking about these things. See, I was an MA student, postgraduate student at Mysore University in the 1979-80. And I came from a very poor background. Fortunately, I got a merit scholarship, and so I could continue my studies. Otherwise, I couldn't have. I'm not talking about my merit and my merit scholarship. My point is, because of that, I could study. And when I went there, my teachers, my classmates, and not just my teachers and my classmates, but people on the campus also came to know about me as possibly an intelligent person. And so I had, this is not about me. The point is that it gave me a chance to ask the student union to invite Shivaram Karanth as the guest for the annual day. And Mysore University, Manas Gangotri, has a huge open-air theatre, which is like the Greek theatre, open-air theatre. And the program will be held there. Thousands and thousands of students, partly because they would be participating in this and that and so on later and so on. I said the chief guest should be Shivaram Karanth. And they said yes. No, that was, that's why I said I had some standing in the university. I was able to influence the student union, of which I was not, I was no office bearer. I wrote a postcard. Those times, I wrote a postcard to Shivaram Karanth saying that, could you please be our chief guest? My God. He wrote back in a week saying, I'll be there at such and such a time. I have my own arrangements in Mysore to stay. You don't have to worry. I will come by my own ambassador car. You don't have to worry. I'll be there on time. My God. He came. He spoke. He spoke to thousands of students and teachers in that open air theatre. And Karanth is a person who will not indulge in formalities. No, sir, this, that, and no. Whoever is on stage, he begins his speech straight away. He spoke on that day about science. And spoke for nearly 1 hour to a rapt audience. And I knew that this great man, when he comes, I shouldn't let go of this opportunity. That was the time of tape recorders. I had got someone, I didn't have it, but I got someone to record it. And the recording was transcribed. And the transcription, I sent it to him, saying, if there are any corrections to be made, please correct it and send it back to me. I want to print it as part of our university magazine. And I had requested our university magazine to include it, and they had said yes. I mean, Karanth, and they couldn't say no. And I gave it a title of my own. His speech, title was mine. Title was Badukuvo Huchu, the madness to live. And I sent it to him. And within a week or so, with a few corrections here and there, without changing the title, he sent it back to me and said, you can print it. That's how my relationship with him began. The second personal encounter that I had was when there was this giant multinational company called Cogentrix, which was planning to establish a thermal power plant in our coastal area. There were protests particularly by fisherwomen, the fishing community, and so on. And there was one. It was a long drawn protest. It's a long story. I will not go into all that. A long story where I was also a casualty. I lost my university PG department job and became a UG teacher. That's another story. There was one protest particularly. There was one very huge protest by fishermen and fisherwomen, mostly fisherwomen, who felt threatened by this, heated water thrown into drained into the sea, which would kill fish. So there was this huge protest march, and Karanth came and joined that protest. Karanth was leading all those protests. He led that protest, and at around 12 o'clock in the midday, he addressed this huge gathering at Nehru Maidan in Mangalore, and spoke so passionately against these multinational corporations and in favor of these poor fishing community people. That was, and I should also add that my guru, your Anantmurthy, was also there. And after the program was over, we were traveling back. We were traveling back by Anantmurthy's car to Manipal. And Anantmurthy said, my God, all these people to whom Karath was speaking, are people who have not read Karanth, but who are all characters in Karanth's books.
Okay.
Huh? That is...
That's a very beautiful memory.
Yes. And the second thing is my 2 visits to his home, to Karanth's home. I cherish them so much. First was, you see, he was gifted a house by one of his very devoted rich man who was a hotelier in Saligrama, where he lived his last years. It was gifted to him that he was told that he could live as long as he wanted in that house. It was a very nice house with a huge compound by the national highway and so on. This was one person called one hotelier in Bengaluru called Ramakrishna Aital. He was a very devoted fan of his. and he lived in that house. Karath was a poor man all the time. So he had his house. And unfortunately, this Aital who had gifted this house, who was younger to Karanth, had died. And now the house is now the property of Aital's children.
Okay.
Now, what would these children think? One doesn't know. They might not know who is Karanth, and they might not have the kind of reverence that their father had for Karanth. That I don't know. That part of the story I don't know. Whatever it is, Karanth felt that now that the person who has gifted this house has died, this is not the place where I should live. And he got constructed a large room with a kitchen and a washroom, bare necessity, some 2 kilometers away from from that house. And he lived there during his last years. And the point is, I went to this house from where he wanted to move out. I didn't know about it. With 2 of my senior friends. One of them was a professor of sociology. He is a professor of sociology, now retired, called Professor Tantri. Much senior to me, but much younger to Karanth, who was very well versed not only in sociology, anthropology, but also in Indian classics, and had written a rationalistic interpretation of the Vedas and Upanishads in a book called Sanutana Dharma Shastra.
Okay.
The title itself is very interesting. Sanutana. Sanutana is very new. Sanatana would be very traditional. It's a play on the word. Sanutana, not Sanatana. Sanutana Dharma Shastra. And Karanth had taken such a liking for that book, to this young man's book. The young man means, not now, much young to him. That Karanth said, I will get it printed. And Karanth got it printed. He proofread it also. And this Shripati Tantri and one of my other very dear friends, Murari Ballard, were about to go to him to meet him to see this final draft of this Shripati Tantri's book at Karanth's house. We went there. Let's say around 2:30 in the afternoon or so. He went to his home. We rang the bell. No response. We waited for some time. And then we just tried to push the door. The door was open. We went in, sat down. We thought it is 2:30. He must be taking a nap. And his house was such that the ground floor, the huge hall, the big kitchen and washrooms and all, ground floor, he used to do his work in the first floor. So we thought he must be in the first floor taking rest. Afternoon, he must be having a nap. And as we were waiting, thinking that he was on first floor, this man comes from outside at about 4 or 4:30 in the evening, sweating all over, saying that he had been to the construction site that he was thinking of shifting from this house into a room that he was getting constructed nearby, 2 kilometers away. My God. I mean, that was the kind of energy, and we thought that he was taking a nap. He was actually at the site of construction, and he came back. And when he came in, the first thing that he did, he was living alone. He was a loner. He had lost his wife several years ago. I think in 1987 or so. He straight went into his kitchen, prepared 4 glasses of juice, limbu juice, and gave it to the 3 of us, one for him, and then talked continuously for 3 hours, very passionately about so many things. My God, very extensively about. It would include Indira Gandhi, it would include Yakshagana, it would include arts, it would include, writers, all that. Painting, all kinds of things. And what happened that day, this I think this is a very special memory that I have. And he had, this is, let's say, 1990s. He had this BSNL phone connection. We don't at that time you didn't have these mobile phones and internet and all that. At least not for us. He had a BSNL phone connection, but then. See, people were so mad after him to invite him to all kinds of lectures and talks that they would just on phone call and say, "Sir, we have a program. Come and join us. Come and preside over." So he had, he had taken a special permission from BSNL to. Block incoming calls.
Okay.
Now we can block very easily. At that time, you had to write to BSNL and take a permission to block incoming calls. So his incoming calls were blocked because that was that. But the problem was he was living all alone. And that day, I was witness to that circumstance where he was preparing juice and bringing it to us. Of course, this his personal secretary, who was fully employed as a LIC employee, central government employee. She would go at 9 o'clock and come back only at 6 o'clock. So in between, he was all alone. And she lived some 2 kilometers away. So morning she would visit him, evening she would visit him. Otherwise, he was all alone. And nobody could call him and find out whether he is all right or not, because he had blocked his calls. I felt so disturbed, and so at that time, my Guru Anantmurthy was in Manipur. I went and reported to him, "Sir, what is this? He is living in a house which the owner of which is now dead, and he is thinking of shifting over. Why can't this government be compassionate and preserve this house, buy this house and give it to him until he lives? And the second thing, why can't this secretary, his personal secretary, of course, who is a central government employee, be a permanent secretary until his death. I mean, now he is 90 years old. I mean, how long? I mean, until he lives, why can't she be shifted from this LIC as a personal secretary to Karanth? Two things. I was really so totally disturbed. And I said this to Ananth Murthy. Ananth Murthy immediately called up the chief minister. Chief minister was Veerap Moily. Veerap Moily was a very devoted disciple of Karath. He did not know all this. If he knew, he would have done it on his own. But he knew. He came to know because of Ananth Murthy. And within 1 week, the government officials were at Karanth's place saying that we are going to buy this house from the children of this Aital at whatever cost, at whatever price they fix. And this would be your house. But the point is, Karanth flatly refused it. He said, no, I don't want to live under anybody's obligation. That is the kind of man Karanth was. And in his last years, he lived in his single room abode. That was my last visit. That was my last visit. And I went, before he died, sometime before he died, I went to that new abode that he had built for himself, which was a huge hall, no furniture, one huge carpet. He was sitting on the floor. We went there, and I could see he had around him the 12 very recent volumes of Reader's Digest. Huge volumes of Reader's Digest, 12 volumes about birds. And several other books also. He was writing something. And he said, you see, I am not a scientist. But Kannada is so poor in science. You see, in the 1940s, he had written 4 volumes of what is called Vijnana Prapancha, the world of science, with pictures, with photographs. Photographs, think of 1940s. Where will you get photographs? He would write letters to America and get photographs and get them printed. And 4 volumes of thousands of pages, 1,000 pages. And 3 volumes of Bala Prapancha for children. In the 1940s, that man in his old age says, I am not a scientist. I don't know much science. But Kannada is so poor in science. I just want to, want this Kannada world to know some science. Since I'm not an expert, I'm trying to get facts from all these books around me, and I'm writing this book. And this book was his, I think, last book, called Pakshi Prapancha, The Amazing World of Birds. That is his last book. The Amazing World of Birds. It was published when he was 90 years old. Okay. And the next point I want to make is, he lived as a person, he lived in Puttur for several decades. And he credited a person called Molahalli Shivaram. Molahalli Shivaram, who is the founder of the cooperative banks here also, who had given him a free hand. whatever experiments you want to make, do. I will somehow fund you. I will find a fund for you. If you have a good idea, funds are not a problem. And Karanth lived, and Karanth acknowledged this. And Karanth established a place called Balavana. Balavana is Vana is forest.
Yeah.
Bala is child. It was something like Shantiniketan. It was for non-formal knowledge, practical education, not theoretical education. And I mean, he did that, and where he had a small zoo where he would take children out that is a very it's a thickly forested land. He would take them out on picnics, and he would also teach. He was doing it single-handedly. He would also write books for them and all that. And he would also show films during those times. And then it was at the beginning. It was not successful. And then he went with this Molhalli Shivaram, who was an officer at that time. Molhalli Shivaram sent a government order to government schools, saying that at least on Sundays, you should take your children to Balavana. That was the kind of support Shivaram Karanth got from him. And this is Karanth saying it, not me. And so he would show them films and all that. But he got it established, and then he began what is called Nada Habba. An annual festival, a week-long festival. And he would invite some of the greatest stalwarts, his own contemporaries, from all over Karnataka to this small Mofussil town called Puttur. Now you do Dasara in Mysore and Vishwa Kannada Sammelana in Mysore and all these kinds of big events or India festivals in foreign countries and all that. This is very new, but this Nada Habba was a very great thing. And more importantly, he invited stalwarts and finest people who did not think like him. You see, Karath was the word that I had used, and I would always use it. He was a loner. He went on his own track. He was not like the others. You can't compare him with other people, except Gandhi or Tagore in some ways. And even there is a problem. He was in some ways different from them also. The other point I wanted to make is
Hello, sir. Hello. Sir? I'm sorry, I think his connection has ended. I'll just check with him.
There was some disruption.
Yeah,
Is it okay?
Yeah,
Okay.
fine.
Okay. And he said, I mean, the language that we use should be a language that the children know. See, I mean, even today, the problem is we have an all Karnataka Kannada textbook. For example, the cow in the textbooks, all Karnataka textbooks, common to all, from the first standard, is Akalu,
Okay.
which is alien to me. We call it Dana. Dana. He was vehemently opposed to this kind of, I mean, imposing some alien language upon children. Okay, you can use it later on, after the 4th standard or the 7th standard. But the first few standards should use a very simple language without Mahaprana. What is Mahaprana in English? I don't know. Akka. If you say Akka, Ka has a Ka beneath it. That is called Mahaprana.
Okay.
Those kinds of, I mean, or no, that's not Mahaprana. Mahaprana is Gha. Gha. These sounds, he would avoid all that. And he himself literally wrote textbooks for children in the 1940s. And they were, at that time, they were accepted. And he was not the only one. There were several others doing that. But he also did it. And the point is that it is child-oriented. The books that he wrote were child-oriented. And I also said that his notion of education was practical and not theoretical. That people should experience it. And he had a joke about schools. He said, I mean, these schools are prisons, prison houses. Just watch the children getting out of school after the long bell at 4 o'clock in the evening. They are run out like mad, released from a jail. School is a prison. That's what he used to say.
I think that idea was also supported by many people later.
Yes.
Europe and like including Michel Foucault and like even pedagogy of the oppressed. All that came much later. But this was visionary to even think in 1940s, especially from somebody who had not actually gone and explored out of India much. As you told, he was I mean, the wisdom came from inside also.
Yes.
This is like
because he was himself not very highly educated. You see?
Yeah,
he learned from life, and he wanted children to learn from life.
Yeah, that was very.
And the other thing is, I mean, he also did a lot of experimentation with adult education.
Okay.
And adult education, he was very particular about pictures, sketches. Simple, like the books that he wrote for school children. There also he had sketches. He would do his own sketches. He would do his own. He would sketch. Here he would write little conversations about what happens in a village or what happens in a marketplace and so on. That would be the text with an accompanying picture, which he himself would draw. Those kinds of books that he did. And the other thing I wanted to say about him as a person, this is the first point I'm making, is his support to artists. My God. Every month, on the 5th of every month, he would send money orders. Money orders ranging from 500 rupees to 1000 rupees to several poor, ailing, but great artists. Several, not one or two, several, on the 5th of every month, he would money order it to them. This is something that is not on record.
Okay.
This is something I personally know. I mean, he had now become popular. Karanth had become popular, and he was able to earn some money, and he had got several awards, and he was this. And if he was given a shawl, he would give it to somebody. That was the kind of man he was. He was not possessive about anything. But more important is that he had very high respect to these poor but very great local artists, folk artists, who he supported, in a manner that is unimaginable. 500 rupees and 1000 rupees in 1980s and 1990s is like 50,000 rupees now. It's not our today's 500 rupees. That is the kind of money that he used to send. And the other thing that I wanted to say about his person is his experiments with the Yakshagana.
Yeah, that was something I also wanted
see,
to know.
Yes, and there are at least three things that I want to say about his Yakshagana. One is, you see, he went from pillar to post, meeting all those very aged senior artists, ailing senior artists, and reinvented some 62 ragas which were lost to Yakshagana. Yakshagana has become so commercialized that it had become addicted to some popular ragas. He reinvented some 62 ragas, and he got and he sought out some people who had some nostalgia about it and employed them in his Yakshagana Kendra, the Center for Yakshagana, as masters. And some of them, one is Hiredka Gopal Rao, another one is Sanjeeva Bananjay Sanjeeva. Oh my God, they are illiterate, but they are great masters in their Yakshagana art. And Karanth, actually found them out, brought them and employed them and gave them a job and made them masters and teach them. And through them, he also reinvented these ragas and also Yakshagana, revived it. But that's one part of the story. The other part of the story, which is very interesting, is that he also modernized it. Just as he went back to tradition, he modernized it. And Yakshagana used to be from 9:30 p.m. to 7 a.m. in the morning, throughout the night. That is the kind of Yakshagana I have known. That is the kind of Yakshagana even now goes on. But he reduced it to a 3-hour Yakshagana by cutting down upon its blabber, talk. Yakshagana has singing. The singing is interpreted by the actor in words. It's actually a repetition. And if the speaker is a good speaker, he could do it wonderfully. But if the speaker is bad, he would just blabber. So, he cut down upon this speech and restricted to music.
So,
and music...
Sorry to interrupt. Yeah. Already it's 1 hour 45 minutes more we have come. So if you could, if you can wrap it up in like another 10 minutes or so, it will be great.
Okay.
Just that
Yes.
people are also watching. So we should.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. He did the Yakshagana ballet and Yakshagana into a ballet, introduced new music, new instruments, including the violin, and took it all over the world and popularized it internationally. That was the first point I wanted to make. And the second is that he is a polymath. And unfortunately, if you look into any introduction to Karanth, this Ramchandra Guha, whom I respect, is credited with having called Karanth the Rabindranath Tagore of India or Karnataka. No, this is U.R. Anantamurthy, my guru, who called Shivaram Karanth. He called him the Rabindranath Tagore of our times. And he said he is also not just an artist. Karanth would not like to be called a writer. He was a polymath. And Anantmurthy gave him the right name, Acharya Purusha. Acharya Purusha. That was the name that he gave. And in literature, as a polymath, in literature, he worked in all genres. He knew his music very well. He knew art, painting, sketching, and book. He wrote book. He did book covers for the cover page was sketches for his cover books were done by himself. Book covers, and he knew sculpture. He knew architecture wonderfully. He had a voluminous book called Kala Prapancha. And I spoke about his Yakshagana, his education, his activism, his science, which is 4 volumes of Vijnana Prapancha, 3 volumes of Bala Prapancha. The films that he made a film. He himself made a film long ago in the 1940s or so. And it was to be edited or whatever in Mumbai. And somehow it got burnt and it was lost. But in the late 1970s, he made a color film. He directed it based on his own novel called Kudiyara Kusu. The title of the film is Malayamakku. A wonderful film which did not attract much attention, but it is a wonderful film called Malayamakku. And it was a very popular film actress of the time. She was called the Shining Star, Menugutare, whom he got to act as the lead actress. And that lady went gaga over it. I mean, she was simply, overwhelmed by the fact that Shivaram Karanth had asked her to come. That was Karanth began as a dancer. He began by teaching dance and drama. He was himself an actor. He used to write poetic dramas. He did printing. He experimented with printing. It was, of course, he printed his first books himself. He knew printing technology, but it was a financial failure. He gave it up. But he knew his photography very well. He knew filmmaking very well. That is what he is as a polymath. And the third point I want to make is about his major works. Before I run out of my time, I should mention at least these few books which I could go on and on speaking about. But first is Chomanapuri. You see, in the 1930s, that was made later into a film by B.V. Karanth, another genius. A national award-winning film.
Yeah, it's
This
a wonderful film.
Chomanaduri film is wonderful. The book is more wonderful.
Okay.
My God, I mean, the kind of he was. You see, Shivaram Karanth was an Orthodox. He comes from an Orthodox Brahmin family.
Hmm.
He went and lived and worked with the outcasts, the untouchables of Puttur region for 6 months. And I have gone through the notes that he has made. It's there in the Bangalore University Museum.
Hmm.
He made notes about each and every person as to how much they earn, how much they spend on drinking, how much they spend on food, how many members in the family, all that. Because he did not know that world at all.
Hmm.
He did field work. This is 1930s, sir.
Hmm.
And on that basis, he wrote this novel. No, those facts and figures don't appear in the novel at all. The novel is a very different thing.
Hmm.
This is about there are some very, very moving scenes. There is a Dalit boy who is drowning in a pond, who was in the company of other children, playing. And the other children were of the upper caste. These upper caste children, they think twice. Belonging to upper caste, can we go and touch him? No, we can't. Well, that is what they were. And the child dies in front of the eyes of his own young boys, young friends. And there is a situation where, this Choma himself is tempted to convert to Christianity. But his daiva, his deity, or his inner conscience tells him, "No, you old man, you can't do this to me. You can't betray your God." And he comes back. This is Karanth speaking about. Karanth, who is a non-believer. And then there is a scene where this Belli, this Choma's young and beautiful daughter, Choma had run into so much of debt. And she says, "Appa, don't worry, I will take care." She takes two young brothers along and goes to work in the farm where Choma was working. And there, the farm owner, who is an Englishman, rapes her, and she succumbs to it willingly. And it is, I think, Shambhanagal who said, looking at the film, that fortunately, Karanth has not introduced this, militant feminism here, that women also have their sexuality, and that a woman yielding to a man in power is not necessarily, to be understood as just exploitation from his side. Yes, from her side, it is her female sexuality. And she, closes all that debt. The debt is closed and comes back. So there are so many moving scenes in that. And the other novel that I have...
Sorry to interrupt there.
Yes.
This Chomanadudi, as I remember, another very senior comrade and friend of ours, he mentioned about the influence of Mother Courage. Brecht's Mother Courage, or the drum rolling, and which became a very important cultural milieu after a point in Kannada cinema and also in Tamil cinema also, like the drum rolling in the film. So this Brecht's influence was there in the original text also, or it came?
No, Mother Courage came to Brecht from Russia, from Gorky. Oh, that is a running theme. I mean, in many places, and so whether it was directly influenced or not. But Karanth, actually, if I had time, I would have gone into these things into great detail. See, Karanth is known for his women characters.
Okay.
Women characters. And even today, the new generation of women writers in Karnataka think of Karanth as their great guru, because he had, like Gandhi and like Camus, he drew his inspiration from women. Gandhi wanted to be a woman in his last years. And Camus said, Camus learned his lessons from poverty from his poor mother, aged mother. And in Karanth, one of the novels is called Mukherjee Kansaguru. Mukherjee is a grandma who can't speak.
Okay.
Her dreams. That is the book for which, the novel for which he got his Jnanpith. You see, his women characters are older women, and he has many, and in his 1960s, when he was in his 60s, he wrote an old man writing a great novel called Mai Managala Sudiyalli, in the whirlpool of the mind and the soul, about a prostitute. And this is a very new technique. A young girl, the child of the prostitute called Manjula, digs up in the attic and finds out that this mother had kept her diary. And she reads through the diary, which means that this prostitute had an inner life of her own. And this is seen by the young high school student called Manjula.
It's a very modern technique for the times.
Not just modern, it's very moving. Yeah. And the question of sexuality that he explores there is so very special. And the mother was not a prostitute. And after looking into the diary, this girl goes and asks the neighboring woman, a very orthodox woman, very devoted to her husband, who was the friend of her mother, who is now dead, prostitute who is now dead. And the mother says, I had all evil thoughts. She lived a very pure life. I might not have trespassed in my physical life, but she was purer. She is purer to any other, chaste woman. Your mother, who was a prostitute, is purer than any chaste woman. That was the devotion that was the
so-called chaste in the society.
Yes. That was the kind of devotion that that was the kind of Karanth that we have. His emotional quotient. I want to emphasize this. See, he was so empathetic. He is known for his empathy. He cared for everyone and anyone, from children to old people. Friends, you write a letter, the next day there'll be an answer. That was the kind of empathy he had. But that emotion was never self-indulgent.
Yes.
No, he does not. He does not show off. His emotions are all meant for other people, not for himself. Uh,
That's something to learn. Actually, that's something to learn
hmm.
for all of us.
And I was mentioning this. I had mentioned this K.K. Hebbar, who done that sketch for his Huchu Manasina Hatumukulu, which is a great book. And more importantly, there was one of his early books called Balve Bedaku. Life itself is the light.
Hmm.
That was the title of one of his early books, which
Almost,
shows that, which
sounds similar to my experiments with truth.
Yes,
Yeah.
and exactly, and actually, it is mm, I mean, Karath was a non-believer.
Hmm.
People call him an agnostic.
Hmm.
But from my reading of things, Karath might not agree with this if he were around. He is like Camus, Albert Camus, who spoke of the philosophy of absurd. And the philosophy of the absurd, since I mentioned this, I should say this. Karanth is very close to Gandhi and Camus. Gandhi is not an artist in the formal sense of the term. Camus is. Both of them, Gandhi and Camus, they tried to enrich life, quantify it, explore. I mean, and they said, life, the answer to life is life. Death is waiting there. Don't pay attention to it. Don't entertain death. Or you entertain death in such a way that death should feel fidgety. You live so exuberantly that death should feel fidgety. And also, okay, one day comes and that is your death, and you will entertain death also. You will go with him. That is the kind of way he looked with. Karanth looked for, I mean, as many ways as possible to enrich life. And
sorry to interrupt, but I think we've already crossed.
Yes, I'm also. I think I am also.
There is so much to talk about Karanth. We can go for a day or week. Actually, speaking about him in another occasion, I think I would also like to hear more with maybe in a more. I would like to see person to person and like listen. That will be more of a feeling. Like one question, like we have covered so much of things about Karanth, and not just Karanth, about Karnataka and like the culture, everything. Especially my favorite, also your Guru, your Anantamurti. There are like few beautiful moments you have shared. One thing which I wanted to ask is right now when we are in a regime where there's so much of intolerance and so much of other things are happening with the Sangh Parivar majoritarian government in power, and especially coastal Karnataka, which unfortunately have become a hub of Hindutva rise. And we know Imam Kalburgi, Comrade Kalburgi, who was murdered. I think it's the same place where Karanth was also like born and operating. So
no, Kalburgi was in northern Karnataka.
Not this place.
No, this is coastal Karnataka. Coastal Karnataka. This is coastal Karnataka.
Okay.
Coastal that Kalburgi, northern Karnataka is not as yet saffronized.
Okay.
This Kalburgi's murder was some accident.
Okay.
Accidental. But this happens every day here in coastal Karnataka, to which Karanth belonged, where he worked, where he was ridiculed, where he also did not care about all these people and grew up to be a great man.
No, that's what I was coming at. What if Karanth lived today? Like if Karanth is alive today, would he be able to? Because you're talking about the fondness of a star, a superstar, or a chief minister. Right now, leaving the Hindutva intolerance part aside, the cultural vacuum we have amongst the popular culture. Would you think a star now would even know somebody of austere nature like Karanth, like from Bollywood or Sandalwood, as they call, or a chief minister would just call and tell that, okay, do the thing. The respect for artists, which we had, especially during the 60s, 70s, and like the time you grew up as a student, also looking up that kind of a cultural vacuum, along with the kind of majoritarian Hindutva thing. How would have somebody like Karanth and his personality would have obviously he would have found his own methods to survive, but
Yes.
obviously he is such a personality, he would have. But for us to live, for us to work and to get inspired from at least 10% of the work what Karanth would have done, because every day becomes a struggle even to live. People are giving up. People are giving up talking. People are giving up working because there's so much you can't even step out. So in this time, I'm asking for myself also. How do we actually answer his life? I know, but if life itself is taken away from you, and you're made so dumb and like silent, how do we actually go about it? How do we actually move from
I don't really know, but Karanth, like Gandhi, would have, as you said, found his own ways of protesting, because he always spoke truth to power. All power, not just political power, traditional power also. Tradition as power does not, power is not located in a chair. It is, it stands disseminated everywhere. There is an ideological apparatus. And Karanth spoke against that. And he returned his Padma Bhushan to Indira Gandhi's government, saying, I oppose this. And when Karanth said something, when he was alive, if he said something, every government would sit up and take notice. That was the power that he was a lone man, but that was the power that he had. Because, they were afraid. Of course, during his last days, he said, when the Ayodhya Babri Masjid was demolished, he said, history has been cruel. A temple must have been destroyed and masjid must have been built. I can't support this Babri Masjid thing. He is known to have said that. But then that is not his whole life does not support it. And that would not have been his stand afterwards.
Yes.
He spoke when the Babri Masjid was demolished. But if he were to live longer, he would certainly have taken objection to all this. And and what as young people, younger generations and younger people, we should learn from him is that he learned everything from life. The problem with our younger generations is they learn things from their WhatsApp. They learn their things from their textbooks, their teachers, their friends, where there is no history, no culture, no sophistication, nothing. It's not as if net and WhatsApp does not provide you sophistication. Unless you search for it, it does not provide it to you.
Yeah.
The easiest access on the social media is to all these advertisements and this blabber and so on. You see, some of the best information I get from the net. It's there. It's not as if the social media is bad. It is. but our younger generation gets its inputs from sources. I mean, they don't even speak to their elders. They don't even know their history, their family history. Forget about national history, international history. They don't even know about their own family history. The foot soldiers here in coastal Karnataka, I have faced them for at least 2-3 decades now. I've been their target. I mean, including my students. In college, of course, they are students, but they know that I am a person who does not share their ideology. And where do they learn from? And if they just hark back to their own parents, forget about teachers. If they just hark back to their parents, they would know how much of untouchability, how much of discrimination, and how in these 2 decades, how all these local deities have been saffronized. This is most worrying and most dangerous. The local deities, the last 2 decades in our, particularly our coastal Karnataka, the local deities are being so rapidly saffronized and included to the Hindu religious pantheon. These are not Hindu gods; they are tribal. They are deities, not gods and goddesses. They are deities.
Must be some ancestral ancestral.
Yes, and these are gods, as A.K. Ramanujan says. These are gods and goddesses who can speak.
Yeah.
Goddesses who can menstruate. And you can directly speak to them. It's not like
those, in our own language, not in Sanskrit.
Yes,
language which I don't know.
Yes, local language, Tulu. Yeah. No, not even Kannada, Tulu. Oh my God. Yes.
Yeah. So it's a pleasure having you, and it was a great evening we had. Not just knowing Karanth, but also knowing you. And you come from, because I have visited Mangalore, and like Malayalis call it as Mangalapuram. So Mangalapuram, I love the name Mangalapuram somehow. I don't know. I like to call it as
Mangaluru has many names.
Yeah. So
Mangalore is British. Mangaluru is Kannada. Kudla is Tulu.
Okay.
And Mangalapuram is or Mangalavaram is Kerala.
Yeah.
And Barry's call it. Barry's also have a name. I forget it. Barry's have another name.
So okay. That's such a rich culture, such a beautiful culmination of because the first time one is obviously when I visited Mangalore. The first time I got in touch with was the film Vidayan, because I couldn't find the language because it was sometimes sounding like Kannada, sometimes sounding like Malayalam. The film Adur Gopalakrishna's Vidayan, which was also in the border. So knowing you from Mangalore and like the kind of diversity what the place has, and also when you talk about Karanth, the kind of personality what he was, it was amazing. I think he was 20 people in one man, more than 20, not 100 people in one man. So it was great knowing him, great knowing you. Some other time we'll catch up on an occasion where we can know more about such personalities. Thank you, everyone.